How would you like to buy just one sweet potato and never have to buy sweet potatoes again? I've been growing sweet potatoes for a really long time, but I wanted to see if I really was growing them the best way possible. So the last couple of years, I've ran some experiments, and the results of those experiments surprised me. So I want to share with you everything I've learned, both from experience, but also from the results of those experiments. And that way, you can start with one sweet potato, and I'll teach you how to choose your sweet potato, how you grow your slips, all the way through to how to store your sweet potatoes. And then you just do it all over again.
All I have needs, I have not provided.
The first thing you need to do is buy a sweet potato, or you might want 2 or 3. Look for an organic, medium-sized sweet potato. Be sure it's organic. That way you know it hasn't been treated so that it won't sprout, and you do want them to sprout. Now, I prefer the red sweet potatoes over the lighter color orange ones. The orange ones are more starchy and they have a tendency to dry out with storage. And I don't can mine or freeze mine, so I want mine to stay moist for a long period of time, as in 9 or 10 months. The red ones, they don't dry out so quick, and they are a little more sweet, and they stay moist for a longer period of time. So watch the video through to the end so you know how many sweet potatoes to get from your grocery store. You don't have to buy someone else's slips. It's so easy to do. The rest of this video is going to show you all the stages it takes to grow sweet potatoes. So how do you know when to start your sweet potato slips? You want to start them about 8 months before you want to harvest them. So depending on where you live, when is it going to get cold where you are? So count back 7 or 8 months from that time. I start mine about the 1st of March. I can get by with as late as the 1st of April. It's going to take a couple of months before you get slips that are long enough to plant. One method is to start them in water. This one was started at the same time as another one that I started in some soil. And I just want to show you, I got 2 vines from it, and they took forever to get started. In fact, I panicked thinking it's never going to work. For some reason, this sweet potato is not sprouting vines. It didn't grow roots for a long time, and the little vines that were really tiny just sat there, and finally it took off. I do prefer to start mine in soil as compared to starting them in water. So I'm just going to barely cover that up. Well, that's not quite deep enough to my liking. I don't like the sweet potato be showing because we have critters and insects that like to feed on them. So that's it, and I'm going to keep that watered, and it will take probably 3 or 4 weeks before I see slips. And those slips are going to take 3 or 4 months before they're ready to plant in my garden. And that's okay because I actually follow up my spring garden with sweet potatoes, and they grow right through the summer here in Central Florida. So if you're living in a place where the soil is cold in March or even April, you want to go ahead and start them indoors. Just get a pot that's big enough to plant it sideways and start them inside. Put it in a windowsill or in a very sunny location. Look for long vines that seem to be doing nothing but making long vines. If you look really, really close here, everywhere where you see a joint that's making more leaves, they have the ability to put down roots, which will become sweet potatoes. So we're going to go ahead and clip off a good length of this vine. I want to show you exactly where I'm cutting it and what I'm doing before I stick it in the water. I don't have any slips that I've grown on purpose. This is a volunteer from a piece that I didn't get when I was harvesting last fall. Let me see if I can bring this up close so you can see. So I'm clipping off that one and that one and that one. And then I leave a couple of leaves on. And this whole section here is what's going to go in the jar of water. It's okay just to leave these here. This one here, there's still some growth up at the top, so I can clip these bottom and stick that down in. And both of these will make a nice vine, and the roots will develop right along these nodes right here. I do highly recommend that you put them in water for 3 weeks or so. It won't take long. I used to just go ahead and stick that right into the ground, and it would stress the plant out so much. I would have to water twice a day, and I would lose probably 25% of them. Here's a clip where I'm going to show you what a difference growing some roots on them first will make when you go to transplant them. I'm so pleased with the sweet potatoes this year. It really did make a difference to start the roots before you plant them. Look. Aren't they amazing? Sweet potato vines are just beautiful. I found out that when you plant them in a bucket of water or a jar of water, check the water daily. Sweet potato plants transpires profusely. That's like me. I'm sweating. I'm perspiring profusely this morning. It's only 8:30 and it's hot already. Transpiration, they suck the water up from a source and they give it back out through their leaves. That's your vocabulary word for the day, transpiration. But look at, we've got all kinds of roots here. They're ready to go right in the ground, just like this. Another word of caution, if you have mosquitoes where you live, which I think is everywhere in the United States, empty out your water. Don't let those mosquitoes grow to maturity in the water that you're hoping is going to grow you some sweet potatoes. So I'm going to plant them thicker this year than I did last year because I've realized that they make more potatoes right where you grow them. So I'm going to plant that fairly deep. You can plant it sideways and it's good to go. So I'm only going to skip about 12 inches and I'll put them right down in there. You can bury them pretty deep. You can even go sideways like you do tomato plants. The ideal time to plant your sweet potatoes is on an overcast day. But, well, you got to do what you got to do, whether it's overcast or not. There's only one thing I don't like about growing sweet potatoes. They attract slugs. And if you pair sweet potato vines with oak leaves, it just seems to be breeding ground for slugs. I've tried feeding them to the neighbors' chickens and the chickens don't even want them. If your sweet potato patch gets infested with slugs, the only thing that I've found that really and truly kills them, salt. I go out every morning and I search for slugs and I sprinkle them with salt. Last year, I made an amazing discovery. You see, I knew that sweet potatoes go wild with tree chips. So I got a tree chip drop, and that is what I put in the pathways between where the sweet potato vines were growing, and I also used them to put them up underneath the vines as well. And you know what? It almost got rid of all of my slugs. I went from finding as many as 180 slugs in one day to only finding 3 or 4. Take a look at this. I surrounded all the beds with tree mulch, and it's worked. Even though there's soil bare down in here, because it's surrounded with tree mulch, I've not found any slugs in here. Today I came out after not checking for several days, and I only found 1. That's amazing. That's really amazing. I'm so happy. I'm still waiting for another tree chip drop this year. If I don't get one, I'm really debating, should I mulch with the oak leaves or not? Maybe I should run another experiment. Half mulched with oak leaves and the other half just wait until those vines cover up the exposed dirt. I'm really hoping for the best thing, and that is tree chips. This is the last half of August, and this is typical weather for me here in Central Florida. It's okay for my sweet potatoes to get a lot of rain at this stage of development, but where it can really get dicey is if you water them too much, or if they get too much rain the last 8 to 10 weeks of their development. A couple of things can happen. If your soil remains wet and doesn't drain out really good and quickly, when you do get a lot of rain or you do happen to overwater, they're going to either rot or they're going to make these long roots and not make the big chunky blocks of sweet potato that you really want. So don't overwater. I learned that because one year during that development stage, I didn't know any better to go ahead and harvest them. A hurricane came through and the sweet potatoes rotted. So I lost a lot of sweet potatoes that year. Last year, I heard a lot of fellow gardeners show these long tubes of sweet potatoes, and they thought it was because the soil was too rich. I did a lot of research on that, and one of the biggest possibilities or probabilities is they got watered too much, or the sweet potatoes happened to be in a low spot on their property and retained too much water. So starting the end of September, I monitor real closely how much I'm watering the sweet potatoes. I let them dry out to a certain degree, and then I'll water them again. So we're typically in a dry season from September all the way through until March of the following year. And that makes it easy for me to monitor how much you're going to be watering your sweet potatoes. One of my experiments was, can I leave these in the ground for 1 more month? Here in Central Florida, it's not going to have freeze, and it probably won't have frost until at least December. So I let them go until mid-December. And I learned that that was not a good idea. You see, my sweet potatoes are usually ready by about the 2nd week of November. That way they're ready for Thanksgiving dinner. So let me show you what happened because I left them in the ground too long. Do you see all those lumps and bumps? I cannot use that sweet potato. Those made dark spots go all the way through the potato. See that? Starting to rot right there. This potato should have lasted this long in storage, but it didn't. And I have a friend who is an expert sweet potato grower, and that's what he told me. He believed that they had been in the ground too long and it had started to deteriorate before I got them out. But here's something that's interesting to me. The red sweet potatoes tolerated being in the ground a lot better than the lighter colored ones. See the difference? This has some insect damage, but it's just dry. I can feel it's just not kept as well as this one or that one. And that has been consistent findings throughout all of my sweet potatoes. So how do you tell when it's time to harvest? Don't do like I did and leave it in the ground for too long. Look for blooms. Once they start blooming, then you start checking. Even if they don't bloom, when you think they're starting to get ready, go ahead and start poking around in the soil. And that's what I'm doing here in this next clip. This is where I planted the original slip. And that is where you're going to find the bulk of your sweet potatoes. So the easiest way to figure out if your sweet potatoes are ready is to very gently brush back the dirt. And you see here, they come to the surface and start pushing the dirt up. Now this guy will still continue to grow. There's another one here, and here's another one. See there? So there's probably several more in this whole area right here, but I am not ready to harvest these. Look at that. Isn't that exciting? That is great size sweet potatoes. Amazing. Oh, I just love growing them. I love eating them. There's nothing bad about sweet potatoes. Oh my goodness. They're so good for you. Look at here. I can't help it. I have to dig down there and bring them out of there. Here's that one. So that experiment taught me, don't leave them in the ground, especially if there's going to be some chilly nights. We didn't experience frost, but that didn't matter. It still affected the sweet potatoes. They don't like to be cold. And the bonus that I found out is that the red ones tolerate these conditions better, and I like them better anyway. So that's what I'm going to grow from now on. The biggest experiment that I did last year was to grow sweet potatoes in 4 different ways. One was to stress the plant out by cutting it back over and over again. Another way was to bury the vines as they continued to grow. Another way was to just plant them in dirt and then put mulch around them and let the vines just grow where they would. And the 4th way was to plant them directly into some mulch right on top of some dirt, not really in the dirt. I have a video that describes every detail of that and what the results were. But long story short, the ones planted in the dirt and then tree mulch around them did the best. In fact, there was a lot of volunteer sweet potatoes where they had grown into the paths, and that's that bonus box that you see here. I harvested about 120 pounds of sweet potatoes, but I lost 15 to 20% of them because they either dried up or those bumps that I was telling you about developed into spoiling. And so I learned a lot with those experiments last year. And now it's time to store your sweet potatoes. Be sure that they're not going to freeze and they're not going to get too hot. You're not going to store them if they're wet. You don't want them to get too dried out. So here in Central Florida, this is the perfect place for me to store them through the winter months. It's not going to freeze inside this shed and it remains cool throughout the day. Now it's the middle of April and it's time to take them inside where there's air conditioning. So wherever you live, you might need to make some adjustments to kind of match what I've just described to you here. If you're going to store your sweet potatoes outside, you have to be mindful that there are mice or rats or whatever else can get in your shed. Maybe you live where there's chipmunks. They will be interested in your sweet potatoes. And we also have insects here in Florida that live through the winter months, and I don't want those in my sweet potatoes either. So what I've done here is, this is a like a screening, and it has metal in it, so it's not like it's fabric. So your critters aren't going to chew through it. And I just roll it up in such a way that there's no way they can fit in between the layers. So it's been rolled up several times so that they can't squeeze in there. These are banana boxes that a kind person in the produce department of the grocery store gave me. And I cut them down to size. They don't need to be deep because you don't want them to be layered deep. And the banana boxes came with this heavy-duty paper. And I stored the largest ones for the longest period of time. So I consider these to be medium size. But look, I've stored the large ones way down at the bottom because they last longer. Now this big guy, he's got so much damage on it, I really don't know if it's going to be edible. But I'm going to bake it and we'll find out. We've got some nice orange ones here, but we've also got some really nice red ones. Once your sweet potatoes are harvested, you don't want to wash them. That dirt on there is not going to hurt anything, and you don't want the water to start working on deteriorating your sweet potatoes. Separate them out by size. You want to eat the smallest ones first, then your medium size, and then your largest ones. The small ones will dry out pretty quick. These medium size have been in here in storage for about 4.5 months already. And some of these, quite honestly, have gotten too dried out. They're not going to work. So I'm going to put them right here where it's going to be dark. And I add an extra layer of this heavy-duty paper right in here with the rest of the other veggies that are supposed to be in the dark. They will dry off here. Even the ones that are damaged, that will heal over and make a scar, and I can just cut around that. And I'm not worried that they're not perfectly clean. That sand will come off of here, and if it doesn't, then I'll just wash them when it's time to prepare them. If you haven't started growing sweet potatoes, what are you waiting for? Go to the grocery store and buy a couple of organic sweet potatoes. I have a whole playlist that describes all the details of everything I've talked about today. You might even discover some of the things that I've changed my mind about. If you don't mind, take just a moment to give it a green thumbs up. It really does help. And why not subscribe? There's lots of other videos that will help you grow an organic garden. Thanks for watching.